As being in the world, Dasein has already discovered a world. We characterize this discovering, which is founded in the worldliness of the world, as the freeing of beings for a totality of relevance. Freeing something and letting it be relevant occur by way of circumspect self-reference, which is grounded in a previous understanding of signification. We have now shown that circumspect being in the world is spatial. And only because Dasein is spatial by way of de-distancing and directionality can things at hand in the surrounding world be encountered in their spatiality. The freeing of a totality of relevance is equiprimordially a letting something be relevant in a region which de-distances and gives direction. It is a freeing of the spatial belongingness of things at hand. The essential disclosure of space lies in the significance with which Dasein as heedful being in is familiar. Space that is disclosed with the wordliness of the world does not yet have the characteristic of a pure manifold of three dimensions. In this proximate disclosedness, space is still hidden as the pure wherein reini warren in which points are ordered by measurement, and the positions of things are determined. With the phenomenon of the region, we have already indicated that, for which space is discovered beforehand in Dasein. We understand the region as that to which the context of useful things at hand possibly belongs, a context which can be encountered as something directional, that is, containing places and as de-distanced. The belongingness is determined by the significance constitutive for the world, and articulates the here and there within the possible whereto. The whereto in general is prefigured by the referential totality, established in a for the sake of which of heedfulness. Freeing and letting something be relevant is referred within this totality. With that which is encountered, as at hand, there is always relevance in a region. A regional spatial relevance belongs to the totality of relevance, which constitutes the being of things at hand in the surrounding world. On the basis of this relevance, things at hand can be found and determined according to form and direction. In accordance with the possible transparency of heedful circumspection, innerworldly things at hand are de-distanced and oriented with the factical being of Dasein. Letting innerworldly beings be encountered, which is constitutive for being in the world, is giving space. This giving space, which we call making room, frees things at hand for their spatiality. As a way of discovering and presenting a possible totality of places relevantly determined, making room makes actual factical orientation possible. As circumspect taking care of things in the world, Dasein can change things around, remove them or make room for them only because making room understood as an existential belongs to its being in the world. But neither the previously discovered region nor the actual spatiality in general are explicitly in view. In itself, it is present in the inconspicuousness of things at hand being taken care of, by a circumspection absorbed in them for that circumspection. Space is initially discovered in this spatiality with being in the world. On the basis of the spatiality thus discovered, space itself becomes accessible to cognition. Space is neither in the subject nor is the world in space. Rather, space is in the world since the being in the world constitutive for Dasein has disclosed space. Space is not in the subject, nor does that subject observe the world as if it were in space. Rather, the subject, correctly understood ontologically, Dasein, is spatial in a primordial sense. And because Dasein is spatial in the way described, space shows itself as a priori. This term does not mean something like belonging beforehand to an initially worldless subject, which spins a space out of itself. Here, a priori means the previousness of encountering space, as region, in the actual encountering of things at hand in the surrounding world. The spatiality of what is initially circumspectly encountered can itself become thematized, and so the task of calculation and measurement for circumspection, as for example, in building a house and surveying land. With this predominantly circumspect thematization of the spatiality of the surrounding world, space in itself already comes to view in a way. The space which thus shows itself can be studied by purely looking at it, if that which was formerly the sole possibility of access to space, namely, circumspect calculation, is given up. The formal intuition of space discovers pure possibilities of spatial relation. Here there is a series of stages laying bare pure, homogeneous space, going from the pure morphology of spatial shapes to analysis situs and finally, to the purely metrical science of space. In this present study, we shall not consider how these are all interconnected. In our problematic, we wish solely to establish ontologically the phenomenal basis for the thematic discovery and working out of pure space. Where space is discovered non-circumspectly by just looking at it, the regions of the surrounding world get neutralized to pure dimension. Places and the totality of places of useful things at hand, which are circumspectly oriented, are reduced to a multiplicity of positions for random things. The spatiality of inner-worldly things at hand thus loses its character of relevance. The world loses its specific character of aroundness. The surrounding world becomes the natural world. The world, as a totality of useful things at hand, is spatialized to become a context of extended things which are merely present. The homogeneous space of nature shows itself only when the beings we encounter are discovered in such a way that the worldly character of what is at hand gets specifically deprived of its worldliness. In accordance with its being in the world, Dasein has always already been pre-given its discovered space, even if unthematically. On the other hand, space in itself is initially still obscured with regard to the mere possibilities of the pure spatial being of something contained in it. The fact that space essentially shows itself in a world does not tell us anything about its kind of being. It need not have the kind of being of something itself at hand in space or objectively present. Nor does the being of space have the kind of being of Dasein. From the fact that the being of space itself cannot be conceived as the kind of being of res extensa, it follows neither that it must be ontologically determined as phenomenon of this res. It would not be distinguished from that res in its being, nor that the being of space can be equated with that of the res cogitans, and be conceived as something merely subjective, quite apart from the questionability of the being of this subject. The perplexity still present today with regard to the interpretation of the being of space is grounded not so much in an inadequate knowledge of the factual constitution of space itself, as in the lack of a fundamental transparency of the possibilities of being in general and of their ontologically conceived interpretation. What is decisive for the understanding of the ontological problem of space lies in freeing the question of the being of space from the narrowness of the accidentally available and, moreover, undifferentiated concepts of being, and with respect to the phenomenon itself, in moving the problematic of the being of space and the various phenomenal spatialities in the direction of clarifying the possibilities of being in general. The primary ontological character of the being of inner-worldly beings is not found in the phenomenon of space, either as unique or as one among others. Still less does space constitute the phenomenon of world. Space can only be understood by going back to the world. Space does not become accessible only by depriving the surrounding world of its worldliness. Spatiality can be discovered only on the basis of world. Indeed, space co-constitutes the world in accordance with the essential spatiality of Dasein itself, with regard to its fundamental constitution of being in the world. The analysis of the worldliness of the world continually brought the whole phenomenon of being in the world into view, without thereby delimiting all of its constitutive factors with the same phenomenal clarity as the phenomenon of world itself. The ontological interpretation of the world which discussed inner-worldly things at hand came first not only because Dasein in its everydayness is in a world in general and remains a constant theme with regard to that world, but because it relates itself to the world in a predominant mode of being. Initially and for the most part, Dasein is taken over benommen by its world. This mode of being absorbed in the world, and in general the being in which underlies it, essentially determine the phenomenon which we shall now pursue with the question, who is it that Dasein is in everydayness? All of the structures of being of Dasein, thus also the phenomenon that answers to this question of who, are ways of its being sane. Their ontological characteristic is an existential one. Thus, we need to pose the question correctly and outline the procedure for bringing into view a broader phenomenal domain of the everydayness of Dasein. By taking our investigation in the direction of the phenomenon which allows us to answer the question of the who, we are led to structures of Dasein which are equiprimordial with being in the world, being with Mitsein, and Dasein with Mitsein. In this kind of being the mode of everyday being a self is grounded. The explication of this mode makes visible what we might call the subject of everydayness, the they does man. This chapter on the who of average Dasein thus has the following structure. 1. The approach to the existential question of the who of Dasein, section 25. 2. The Dasein with of others and everyday being with, section 26. 3. Everyday being a self, and the they, section 27.